The laughter hit 16-year-old Alara Voss before she had even reached the center of the clubhouse. It rolled across the room from a group of rugged bikers sitting around wooden tables, loud enough to make everyone nearby turn and look. Alara stopped beneath the doorway, rainwater dripping from the sleeves of her oversized gray hoodie and the old black leather jacket hanging over it. She had expected uncomfortable stares. She had expected questions. What she had not expected was for grown men to laugh at something she had spent months protecting like it was the last piece of her father she had left. One biker pointed toward the back of her jacket and grinned at the others. The jacket was clearly too large for her narrow shoulders, worn at the edges, and covered with faded stitching. To them, it looked like something a teenager had found in a forgotten closet. But Alara knew every scratch on that leather. She knew the small tear near the left pocket. She knew the faded stitching on the shoulder. Most importantly, she knew the patch sewn across the back, a patch that had belonged to someone who had once walked into this very clubhouse and been treated like family. Alara lowered her eyes, tightened her fingers around the strap of her backpack, and quietly wondered whether coming here had been the biggest mistake of her life. If stories about courage, kindness, and second chances mean something to you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0 if you believe in kindness and second chances. Because sometimes, the person everyone underestimates is carrying a story powerful enough to change an entire room. Alara had not come to the clubhouse looking for attention. She had come because of a promise. Her father, Corbin Voss, had been a mechanic who could repair almost anything with an engine. For years, he had worked in a small garage on the edge of town, fixing motorcycles, old trucks, and anything else people brought through his doors. He had never been wealthy, but people trusted him because he never asked how much they could pay before helping them. When an elderly customer came in with a broken vehicle and only enough money for parts, Corbin would quietly reduce the labor cost. When a teenager needed his first motorcycle repaired, he often stayed late to teach the kid how the engine worked. Alara had grown up watching him turn broken machines into working ones and frighten strangers into relieved customers. Then, months earlier, Corbin had died unexpectedly after becoming seriously ill. The garage closed. The bills arrived. The house became painfully quiet. Alara's mother, Maris, worked long hours, but there was never enough money to make everything feel normal again. Alara started helping after school at a local repair shop, hoping to learn enough to keep her father's memory alive. But there was one thing she could not repair: the empty chair at their kitchen table. 3 days before Corbin died, he had given Alara the old jacket. He had pulled it from a storage box and brushed the dust from the shoulders. He told her it was not valuable because of the leather. It was valuable because of the people connected to it. The large patch on the back carried the words, "Iron Wolves, Founding Member, 1971. Corbin had explained that the patch belonged to an old motorcycle club that had once helped him when he was a young mechanic struggling to keep his garage open. He had been accepted into their circle because he had repaired several motorcycles for members who had fallen on difficult times. Over the years, the club had become part of his life. But Alara had never met them. Corbin had always said that one day he would introduce her properly. That day never came. After his funeral, Alara discovered an old envelope in her father's toolbox. Inside was a handwritten note containing the name of the Iron Wolves Clubhouse and a simple message: "If you ever need help, show them the patch. They will remember." So, on a bright Saturday afternoon after several days of rain, Alara finally walked through the clubhouse doors. She had imagined people welcoming her. Instead, she heard laughter. The largest man at the nearest table leaned back in his chair and shook his head. His name was Garrick Hale, though Alara did not know it yet. He had a gray beard, a weathered leather vest, and the kind of presence that made the entire room seem smaller. He looked at Alara's oversized jacket and smiled as if he were trying not to laugh. Another biker said something about the jacket looking like it belonged to someone's grandfather. A few men chuckled. Alara's face grew warm. She wanted to turn around and leave. She wanted to disappear before anyone could see how close she was to tears. But then her hand touched the patch on her back. She remembered her father's voice. "Show them the patch." So she slowly turned around. The room went silent. The laughter disappeared so quickly that Alara could hear the hum of an old ceiling fan above her. Garrick Hale stood up. He stared at the patch as though he had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. One of the older men beside him, Dorian Mercer, pushed his chair backward and rose too. His eyes locked on the stitching. The words, "founding member," were faded, but still readable. Then Dorian whispered the name Corbin. Alara turned around. For the first time since she had entered, nobody was laughing. Garrick walked closer, but stopped several feet away. His voice was quieter now. He asked Alara where she had gotten the jacket. She told him the truth. It belonged to her father, Corbin Voss. Garrick's expression changed completely. He asked if Corbin was her father. Alara nodded. The old biker lowered his head. He told her that Corbin had saved his life in a very different way years ago. Garrick had been stranded on a freezing highway with a motorcycle that would not start. He had no money for a proper repair. Corbin had stayed with him for hours, repaired the bike with spare parts from his own garage, and refused payment. Garrick had promised that if Corbin ever needed him, he would be there. But Corbin never called. Garrick had assumed his old friend simply moved on. Then Alara told him that Corbin had died. The clubhouse became completely still. One by one, the bikers lowered their eyes. Dorian stepped forward and told Alara that her father had done the same thing for him. Another man remembered how Corbin had repaired his son's motorcycle before a school graduation. Someone else remembered Corbin bringing food to a family whose truck had broken down. Each memory came slowly, almost painfully, as though the men had opened a door they had kept closed for years. Alara listened with tears in her eyes. She had spent months believing that her father's world had disappeared when he died. Now she realized that pieces of him were standing all around her. But there was still something Alara had not told them. Her mother's landlord had given them 30 days to catch up on overdue rent. The small garage where Corbin had worked was also about to be sold. Alara had been trying to save enough money to buy the old tools and equipment because she wanted to reopen the garage someday. She knew it sounded impossible. She was 16. She had no business experience. No savings. No adult plan. Just a toolbox, an old jacket, and a promise from a father who was no longer there to guide her. Garrick listened without interrupting. Then he looked around the clubhouse. He reminded the others of something Corbin had once told him: a person's worth was not measured by the size of their bank account, but by how many people could say their life was better because that person had been there. That sentence broke something inside Alara. For months she had wondered whether she had failed her father because she could not save the garage. Now she understood that maybe saving the garage was not the first thing she needed to do. Maybe she needed to save what the garage represented. The next morning, Alara returned to her father's workshop. To her surprise, several motorcycles were parked outside. Garrick and the Iron Wolves had arrived. They did not bring money and simply hand it to her. They brought tools, spare parts, cleaning supplies, shelves, paint, and most importantly, time. They spent the day helping clean the neglected workshop. They repaired broken equipment, organized Corbin's old tools, and carefully restored the faded sign above the entrance. Alara worked beside them. She learned. She asked questions. She made mistakes. And every time she became frustrated, someone reminded her that her father had once been a beginner too. Over the following weeks, the garage slowly came alive. The Iron Wolves created a small community repair program in Corbin's memory. People who could afford repairs paid normally. People who could not were helped whenever possible. Ilara continued attending school while spending afternoons learning mechanics under proper adult supervision. The jacket remained hers. But something had changed. The same men who had laughed at it now treated it with extraordinary respect. One afternoon, Garrick carefully looked at the old patch and told Ilara that the patch had never made her important. Her father's character had. The patch had simply reminded them of what they had forgotten. Months later, the garage reopened under a new sign. Voss Community Garage, built on second chances. Ilara stood beneath the sign wearing her father's jacket. This time, she was not hiding. The iron wolves stood behind her, and the people of the neighborhood gathered outside. Her mother stood nearby, smiling through tears. On the wall inside the garage hung a framed photograph of Corbin, surrounded by small handwritten notes from people whose lives he had touched. Ilara looked at the photograph and finally understood something she had been too young and too heartbroken to see before. A person does not disappear simply because their voice becomes silent. Sometimes they remain in the skills they teach, the kindness they give, the people they help, and the courage they leave behind. The bikers had laughed at Ilara's jacket because they saw worn leather. Then they noticed the patch. But the patch was never the real reason they became silent. They became silent because it reminded them of a man who had spent his life helping others without asking what he would receive in return. And that day, Ilara realized she did not need to become exactly like her father. She only needed to continue the kindness he had started. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people deserve second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps stories like this reach someone who may need a little hope today. And before the story ends, leave this special comment: kindness leaves a legacy. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness survives longer than anything money can buy. And sometimes, the thing people laugh at first is the very thing that reminds them who they once promised to be.